All right. Welcome to WeatherGod's Wisdom, Season 2, 2020 hurricane season, where we are going to be talking about tropics in this particular video, and we will be talking about the severe weather that is ongoing in Texas and Oklahoma, and now in New York as well. In the next video discussion that I will be doing later this evening. But today we are going to be discussing 90L, and now, I think tropical depression, it might have just been designated. 91B here, which is in the middle of the Bay of Bengal, this gigantic convective mass that has really kind of turned it up today. Anyway, let's get back into 90L. As always, refer to the National Hurricane Center and National Weather Service for all official information regarding 90L. These are just my thoughts and mine alone. Okay. So 90L has picked up the pace in terms of organization today and has begun to kind of have a cyclonic nature to it. Convection on the eastern side is moving slowly to the northeast and is kind of trying to wrap around the storm. It's more westerly as it kind of rotates around this gyre here that is centered near Miami Beach. And clouds have been exiting to the west today, and there's not been a whole lot of motion on the southern side, other than westerly motion. It's kind of just a trough in here, and there's a lot of stuff kind of trying to move around it. It is tightening. It is not yet a fully spinning system. I would be very surprised if we found any westerly winds on the southern tip of Florida right now, because the cloud motion is not determining that. A lot of the surface clouds are still moving almost due south and west here on the side of the system. And yeah, so it is organizing though. Pressure has been falling. Pressure falls have been reported throughout the day in the Bahamas and in the Florida East Coast near Miami. So this is organizing. It is not yet fully organized, but it still has an 80% chance to develop according to the National Hurricane Center, so it is certainly looking a little better than it was yesterday. So, the future with this system. This is the wrong basin. Okay. Future with this system is becoming a little more clear now that we have a general area of where it is probably going to develop. It should close off within the next 12 to 18 hours. And it will be very weak because convection is still being sheared mainly off to the east. You can see that in this model run here. This is the GFS 18Z for Friday, May 15th. And you can see that this is still a sheared system. It is not as sheared, but that shear will ultimately end up benefiting the system, because if you look at the upper dynamics, as the system moves further north, it will move into a less sheared environment, and you can see that this will actually help ventilate the system just a little bit, and so it could allow for some modest intensification here, and we're talking like modest. Like, this thing might not even get to 50 miles per hour if it becomes a tropical storm, if it develops. So, not super strong here, but what has been trending on the GFS and CMC, but not the European model, is this approach to the Carolinas, and I will show you that. Precipitation, you can see this storm approaches very close to the Outer Banks near Wilmington and Cape Hatteras up here. You can see how close it gets, and so could be some rough weather in the coastal parts of North Carolina. And the reason this is happening is because there's more of a blocking feature with the high that's in the mid-levels here that takes longer to get out due to this trough that's here that is going to pick the system up and put it out to the east. But until that happens, there's not going to be a whole lot really stopping this from moving just kind of straight north, because it'll be drifting along the outer edges of this ridge, and this low-level ridge, that because the storm is not super tall, and its convection is not like being influenced by the upper levels of the atmosphere. So you can see the surface ridge right here is kind of moving it almost due north, and it does not really give in until this trough comes in and changes the overall flow. So until this happens, until this trough comes in and changes the overall lower level and mid-level flow that is directing the system due north, this is still going to be moving north and could pass close to the Outer Banks here. And while the system will not be super intense because it is a sheared system and will take a while to organize because dry air is being entrained on all levels of the system, and you can see that in the convective pattern of the system. You can see there's a lot of rain on this side, and the shear that is being imparted upon the system is putting in a lot of dry air into the system. And we can further confirm that on the relative humidity. You can see that the dry air is being put into the system and is still kind of asymmetric, but as it gets further north, it becomes more shielded off from this dry air, and so it could intensify just a little. It's not, again, this is still above 1002 millibars, so if anything, this is probably a strong tropical storm, but at most could lead to some rough weather, but we still have not yet determined how close this is going to pass to the Carolinas and how much they are going to feel from the system. Right now, it's still offshore and probably won't get much closer unless the surface high keeps strengthening. But if this surface high keeps on coming in stronger, then we could have, the system be a little closer than it's currently forecast. But it is forecast to make a pass very close to the Outer Banks. But as long as the core of the system remains offshore, really all it is just showers and breezy conditions on the coast. But if it comes onshore, the effects are obviously different for the Carolinas and specifically the Outer Banks of North Carolina. And that's really all that you'll be seeing with this system. So, with that, let us go to 91B, or maybe tropical depression. I've not checked the advisory. That has probably just come out. This system has really just been firing off extraordinary levels of convection today. The cloud tops actually break the satellite charts. So, very bad. This system is allowing for there to be some deepening that's happening here. It is still skewed to the south a little bit. Equatorial outflow is much stronger than the poleward outflow that has allowed the system to ventilate a little bit. There's not a whole lot of outflow coming out of the system yet, but that is changing as we are talking. This outflow is beginning to stretch northward, and you can see this ridge is beginning to kind of erode here. It still will be in place for the next couple of days, but as this system kind of moves through and pushes this ridge out, dry air to the north will begin to retreat along with this and will be replaced by this gigantic moisture envelope that is around the system, which will allow for uninhibited or nearly uninhibited intensification that will be ongoing for the next 5 days. And this system is heading towards Bangladesh or the Ganges Delta. It's not entirely certain, but wrong basin. So, the immediate forecast for the system does not call for much movement. The system should be deepening over the next 24 hours and becoming a pretty strong tropical storm. It's still very large. Obviously, the system will not have super strong winds right away. Rapid intensification requires the system to be a little more organized than it is right now, because as long as we're looking at this and not something more cyclonic or circular, then there's not significant banding going on, then the system will probably not rapidly intensify over the next 24 hours until the system can get some banding going on that is kind of leads to this rapid intensification period that is being forecasted. It is going to largely remain stagnant in intensity for now. It will continue to deepen, and it is still in the early phases of being a tropical cyclone, so I do not expect this to intensify immediately. However, as this system carries north, it will be able to intensify pretty much uninhibited, barring any eyewall replacement cycles, because there is no shear that is in place here. There may be some shear, there's possibility for shear, with the ridge that is guiding the system to the north because of where the ridge is positioned and where the anticyclone of the system is positioned. So we could be seeing a system that's getting sheared from the south, but as noted previously, this system is moving to the north, and so this shear will likely help it ventilate a little bit, and ultimately will not do too much to it, and it will be able to survive this shear because it is not very strong. And so really the system will have a quite impressive look in about 3 days, barring any dry air intrusion or any short-term inhibition. So most models take this in to Bangladesh as a strong Category 4 cyclone, and it could be a super cyclonic storm by the time it runs into Bangladesh or the Ganges Delta, but given the amount of time between now and whenever this thing makes landfall, there's a lot of room for error here on track. It could run into Kolkata, or it could run into Myanmar, or it could just run straight into the Delta. All of these situations are bad, obviously, because this is a Category 4 cyclone that's coming into a populated area. But this system is extremely dangerous and will likely be extremely dangerous by the time it runs into this area. This is a very vulnerable area in the world to tropical cyclones. It's extraordinarily vulnerable. We have historic analogs for this type of system to come in, and we are hoping that the system does not get as strong as it is forecast, because that would be a nightmare for these countries. And even if it is not too bad regarding intensity, it would still have a lot of rain that would be dumped on a river delta, which would flood a very large portion of the country of Bangladesh and the city of Kolkata. So, all in all, this is a pretty horrible situation if this model run verifies and if the other intensity forecasts verify. But until that happens, just stay on guard for the system, because it is a very powerful system at the time of landfall according to several model forecasts, and they have been trending relatively the same on intensity, but I mean, intensity does not really matter in this situation because of how vulnerable these areas are to tropical cyclones. So, you see why I wanted to make a severe weather video separately, because I've been recording for 14 minutes. Okay, that is all for this episode. As always, refer to the National Hurricane Center, JTWC, and any cyclone warning center for the latest advisories on 91B, possible tropical depression now, and 90L. And I will see you guys tomorrow for our next video on this system. Good night.